Guys, we're gonna start the lecture now. This lecture is from Moscow, and Maria Kupsova, coordinator from the Global Summer School from Moscow, will introduce the speaker of today. Hello, Maria.
Hello, Aldo.
Nice to see you.
Super nice to see you. Greetings from beautiful Moscow. We are here with 14 great students and Katya Larina, who will give a lecture today. And Katya Larina is an urban designer, architect, and educator from St. Petersburg, but she's based in UK. She's as well a guest critic, juror, and a lecturer at AA and Bartlett, as well as she does many workshops here in Moscow at Strelka Institute. I think that I will just give the word to Katya and she continue the lecture. So Katya, please.
Hi guys. Thank you very much for this fantastic opportunity to make a speech. I don't know how many cities actually are looking at me right now.
I think we
and
have
how many time zones?
8. No, now I think we launched 6 locations for sure, 6 other locations, and 105 students.
Okay, that's a lot of pressure. Apologize, just in front, but I'll try my best. Well, thank you, Maria, for the introduction. Actually, well, yes, I'm an architect and urban designer based in London, but I work in doing research both in Russia and in UK. And also, I quite often get involved in education projects and do workshops. And my background is architecture and urban designer. Some time ago, I did master program in Architectural Association in landscape urbanism. And basically this lecture, in this lecture, I will share the ideology towards the urban design I have obtained from the landscape urbanism theory. Also, I will show how the methodology of landscape urbanism got integrated with computational technologies and information culture. So basically, landscape urbanism is derived from the landscape design practice, and landscape design practice historically was mimicking natural landscapes. And in shall we?
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, by the way, this is the name of the lecture, Material and Landscape. Now it's clear why I talk about landscapes all the time. And so I was saying that landscape historically was mimicking natural landscapes, but in 20th century, as Chris Reed writes, the shift in ecological thinking and research and the parallel rise of the process-oriented design experiments opened the new discourse in design and urbanism. Then designers, instead of designing an image of the natural landscape, moved to the design of the mechanism of the behavior of the natural landscape. And this approach towards the urban design was formulated in Northern America in the 90s and initially was called by Charles Waldom landscape urbanism. It is changing and evolving and getting new names now, but keeps the main principles. This approach perceives a landscape as an active agency driving the city, where the city is a complex interrelations of series of landscapes, psychological, social, economical, informational, and physical. So let's say first I will try to illustrate the landscape urbanism vision of what is the city through the research we did recently. This research we did together with Tatiana Garbachevskaya, another teacher and researcher from Frankfurt. School of Design, and together with her, we've been commissioned to do the research about mining industrial city Nikel, which is located on the border of Norway and Russia in beyond Arctic Circle. And actually, this dark ecology event is quite interesting. It's a series of conferences and cultural events which were happening in that area in Arctic, inviting artists, musicians, anthropologists, curators, and very well-known philosophers like Timothy Morton and Graham Hireman. So our research is called Nickel Materiality. It explores the industrial mining town of nickel through the lens of unique material substances and artifacts appeared during nickel's existence. Through the catalogue of the artifacts, we present nickel settlement as a material system. See here. And what we mean when we say material system? Material system is a multiscalar expression of the new matters which have appeared, evolved, and been embedded in the town fabric. The series of photos and maps we present using an online platform trace how different materials emerged in nickel. On a micro scale, they show the physical properties of the materials. On macro scale, they show the social economic processes which happened in nickel, and as well as environmental processes in the region. Nickel was built as an element of the greater infrastructure dedicated to serving a mining industry of Soviet Union. Built in the area of extreme living conditions, it appeared as an artificial organism covered by top-down protective dome, consisting of vital infrastructure and, importantly, of careful management of that infrastructure over many years by the state. Nickel became a great example of cities which were alienated from the natural environment and climate. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, nickel was left without a central control on which its existence depended. Its protective dome was destroyed. Its artificial ecology had to adapt in order to survive. Nickel was built as an element of sorry, got lost a little bit. Through the exploration of the materiality of the town, named after the material, nickel, we reveal an emergent symbiosis of the natural environment and the alien materials brought in through human activity. We register a complex loop of relationships between, on one hand, those processes which these new materials have been continuously forming and an overall structure of the territory, and on the other, processes by which the territory simultaneously participated in the formation of the materials. The artifacts we've collected are like objects from the Cabinet of Curiosities. They are sample of the unique ecology which emerged under the protective dome and which was transformed when the dome was destroyed. Applying ecological thinking to the subject, we classified about 200 samples of nickel materiality using 3 of the organizational concepts of the ecological system proposed by John T. Lyell in his article Design for Human Ecosystem. One group of artifacts is related to the idea of structure. Structure as a composition of artificial ecosystem of nickel. Here we were searching for the links between the processes which shaped the settlement within a different historical epoch and the materials which appeared at that time. Another organizational concept used is function, a flow of energy and materials. Here we were looking for the materials and artifacts that related to the life support of the functioning city. The last organizational concept is location, There we were searching for materials which encrypted traces of boundaries of competing patterns of the existing ecosystems. The material entity of the city has been shaped by the successive ideological paradigms of colonization of far north. Soviet period glorified the conquest of nature, as seen in ambition to modernize and construct a better environment for living. During Soviet times, the city had a highly subsidized infrastructure which provided all those good climate factors, such as a double holiday time, early retirement, good facilities for sport and education, factors which attracted specialists from the whole country despite the extreme climatic conditions. As an element of the big industrial machine, the city was shaping its own closed system of life support infrastructure, ready to fight and resist, but not to collaborate with Arctic. This is actually a very nice image where you could see these kind of artificial daylight light poles, which were kind of compensating the in the polar night, this lack of sun. During those years, Nickel developed a set of infrastructural elements of resistance, such as an artificial daylight to resist the polar winter darkness and network of central heating to resist the cold climate. Time and reshaped this ambition infrastructure, which is now exposed on the surface, forming the intertwined three-dimensional landscape and reminding us about the alien nature of the town. On the one hand, the city represents a rejection of the natural context, increasing the gap between nature and human presence. On the other hand, all the components of nickel materiality are now seamlessly embedded into the natural environment, shaping a post-human ecology of the region. One such component, a byproduct of the process of smelting nickel ore, is black copper nickel dust, the slag, which forms black dunes and which spreads over the vast territory, contaminating local ecology. Actually, everything you see at the background, all these black dunes of the byproducts created by industry. And dispersed by the prevailing winds towards the settlement, the sharp black crystals of the slag cuts into the surface of the town, accumulating in cracks between materials and penetrating through the surfaces. In the Soviet period, government required the use of local materials for construction, and slag became one of the local materials. The city became an experimental plant for testing a variety of applications of this industrial substance without a clear understanding of the danger of this toxic dust can cause. Slag has been widely used as a material for public spaces or housing. Here is an example where slag contacted with mortar in the wall structure and over time revealed new properties. The slag had acquired incredible strength, so the buildings could not be demolished after all. Here is an example of concrete panels where fillet, another byproduct of the smelting, has been used. Later, this material caused unexpected chemical reactions and the panels started bursting from inside. The result is unusual facade pattern of the city where the walls are partially rebuilt with bricks or have cracks filled with brick bands. When the artificial environment of the city nickel, maintained from the top down for so many years, became neglected, all the synthetic matters that have been under the protective dome got exposed both to the Arctic climate of Murmansk region as well as to the conditions of the post-Soviet social economic crisis. Today's city facades are normally painted in pale colors, but previously there was a requirement to paint them in flashy bright colors to compensate color starvation. Now, because of harsh weather, the old bright paint glows through the peel of new paint, creating a unique texture over the settlement facades. It's actually very interesting to be in this city because you discover so lots of unusual patterns, unusual surfaces, and very unusual materials. Under the pressure of the extreme conditions, materials are not only decay but also evolve more rapidly. All the elements of the environment, living and non-living, are forced to interact and cooperate with each other, forming a new hybrid ecologies in order to survive. Materials changes their properties and appearance, mix and blend, redistributing and joining their energy and forces, forming a multi-materiality. In the abandoned parts of the city of Nikel, where the natural processes of ecological competition happens, we discovered that a variety of ecological patches appeared even with the scale of a single building or single flat or urban block. There, the materials and matters either resist each other or form a variety of hybrids, multi-material samples. Over the time, local microorganisms and plants develop forms of symbiosis with such alien substances like copper-nickel dust. The black dunes of toxic substances became covered by green layers of plants and funguses, showing the power of matter that continuously accumulates the energy to live. Anthropologist Lambros Malaforos, by the way, I really recommend you to check his papers. So he blames the separatist logic of modernism that has alienated humans from the spirit of matter. He says we want to reclaim the spirit and embody the intelligence that comes with it. Following that, we suggest multimateriality as a tool to discover or rediscover a hidden dimension of material existence. Nickel as a physical material and symbolic notion penetrates all the levels of the settlement existence, representing the evolution of the artificial city-created ecology. At first, there was nickel, the material, the reason why the settlement was built. Later, nickel byproducts were used in construction of the city. Nowadays, nickel has become an aggressive agency of destruction. Acidic rains and slag, both result of nickel production, has devastated the local ecology. Beyond this, the copper-nickel dust has entered into the symbiosis with local microorganisms. With the lifetime of the settlement, through the wide spectrum of new materials, the natural resource hidden underground has formed a thick layer of Anthropocene topography, seamlessly merged with the natural landscape on both micro and macro scale. Considering nickel's multimateriality, it's impossible to draw the line anymore between what has been made by humans and what by natural ecology. Slavoj Žižek, talking about ecology without nature, says the ultimate obstacle to protecting nature is the very notion of nature we rely on. Following that, we are not only interested in the failed past of human ambition to overcome nature, but also aim to discover the processes of co-design driven by both human ambition and also forces of the natural environment, which together shape the existing and future landscape of the post-human ecology. So our research is, if I can show you, don't be too harsh, it's a work in progress, but basically we are, so we put online all these 200 samples of materials we collected in that city, and through which materials we actually managed to tell the whole story about this city and whole kind of, and a story about any city, actually, and its interrelations with the natural processes and natural context which happens within it. We also put a series of maps, if you can see, a series of filters, so you can turn on, and to each, as I was explaining in the beginning, we structured these material samples, imagining that this is actually elements of the artificial ecology. So we, like ecologists, put it in the different classes, class which related to functions, class which related to structures, class which related to locations. So these are our, let's say, classes, and you can check and actually see the story. Not always, but sometimes you can see the story about the material or artifact. And the good thing that we actually making it open source. For that, we definitely have to translate it in Russian. But any user, any person who lives in Nickel also can add and upload their material samples and the stories behind these materials, and actually describe this city a little bit better.
Do you already have new uploads?
Not yet. We didn't actually launch it properly, and as I said, it has to be in Russian. Otherwise, I mean, only tourists crossing that area probably will contribute. So. Well, actually, hopefully, I managed to show on how many scales and how seamlessly artificial structure of the city now is connected to natural ecology, and how ecology is connected to the city. And this example of this ambitious project of Arctic city Nickel is actually a warning to the contemporary ambitious urban projects. We all know these urban projects, and these projects still very detached and ignorant to the natural environment. In fact, most of them are using the progressive high technologies to make their protective dome, which what I was describing, even stronger. It's like I'm talking about those cities in desert, these, again, some smart cities, which this smart infrastructure is basically kind of trying to protect city from the whole uncertainty of the context which is going on around. And here's a question. Also, all these communication technologies and infrastructures, these virtual data flows, in the way actually within a city becoming very, very tangible. So. And I need to put it this up. Sorry. Get height. Is that what you would do? It's okay. So yeah, and the question I'm putting on is how, using these technologies, data and instruments of computation modeling, we can form these co-design of natural processes, and actually our design interventions. Well, instead of modeling landscape instead of modernizing landscape, urbanism proposes the integration within the forces driving the system and shaping the materiality of this environment. In this sense, all the advanced technologies are very well applied to visualize and model a complexity of the landscape behavior. Flow modeling, scripting, and processing in particular, quoting Chris Reed again, provide a time-based platform for representing change and evolution of the natural processes we observe in the city. Also allowing us to model dynamically changing interrelations between natural and artificial actors of the urban ecology. These are some examples of those technologies landscape urbanism students in Architecture Association use in order to achieve integration of the design strategy they propose and the dynamic natural processes of the context. These are models simulating complex environmental processes along with built-in flexible urban strategy capable to respond and adapt. In this case, it's a soil erosion driven by the flood simulation. So basically, students, instead of building a dam or proposing some intervention which actually fight or modernize this environment, their project is let's say, using this flood effect, using all the advantages of this in changing the agriculture land of the territory. And I was quite impressed that within a time, landscape urbanism students are using much more and more sophisticated tools, which they borrowed from hydrological and geological studies. I mean, you're welcome to check those projects yourself on the website. Also, to overcome the gap between the virtual modeling, which is quite an often critique, and the real physical processes, one can link physical prototype to its virtual model, like it has been done in this workshop, moderated by Eduardo Rico. And also, this design platform allows you direct interaction with the model, where you can test and record a feedback from the virtual model. So basically, that's a model of of the river mouth, and then they run physical tests there. They send this information into the Grasshopper script. Grasshopper script has already certain algorithm of adjusting the scenario which they testing on the territory, and actually it's quite an interesting way of proceeding with modeling of natural processes, let's say. This is a small 3 days workshop I have participated in within a team Volatile Territories in the framework of the Smart Geometry 2014 in London, in Bartlett. This was the attempt to model the behavior of less tangible and more strategic drivers of the development of the territory. So let's say when we talk about these natural processes which are happening like in the river or within the landscape, which are pretty physical, it's quite easy to visualize, but the question is, how would you visualize and model the activity of a public or economical activity or social interrelations? So that was the actually attempt to deal with that. And using processing algorithm and recursive design software, which allows setting up the multiplicity of complex interrelations within agents of the system. We were simulating the emerging potentials of creative economy within London Brick Lane, quite a vibrant environment right now. And the ambition was to model and study the potential behavior and physical redistribution of bottom-up initiatives in a small business of the territory. So that's basically this thing in the middle is this recursive software, and this one is this processing engine which were connected to the software together. And recursive design software initially has been developed as a design instrument in scale of the building, upscaling its capacity to the order to cope with urban strategy required rethinking of the instrument and taking into consideration such factors as phasing, scale, strength and evolution of interrelations in action of the territory. We were focused on the definition of the bottom-up drivers of the territory. We introduced social network data of the model to the model of urban growth to stream location-based information from Foursquare API. So basically, we set the connections, we imagine our strategies, we set these complex interconnections, and then we had to understand the behavior, the starting points, and then we used the popularity of the territory in order to understand what will be the starting points. And this popularity of the territory we actually were taking out from the Foursquare information. Sorry. Actually, when you start playing with these instruments, you're an architect, and this is still very virtual. It's very close to, let's say, a bubble diagram, but in a way, you actually still perceive it as a three-dimensional kind of space, and different interrelations. It's either hierarchical between different businesses or different, let's say, initiatives on the side, or more horizontal, or I don't know, more branching system. It's still in the way it represents in this spatial organization. And of course, you cannot perceive this is an instrument which produces a master plan of a territory. That's very important thing which you have to know. I understand. And this instrument doesn't imply the straightforward control or search of the optimum. It allows the discovery of the system hidden qualities of the bottom-up processes in motion. The simulation allows, in a way, a mediate control of the project, but not straightforward control of the project. But very often, environment is missing those bottom-up driving forces. We were lucky in the previous project work with Brick Lane because there was a lot of things happening there, and but actually, if you deal with real problems, with real, let's say, declining cities, those bottom-up driving forces either restrain and hidden or never even existed. City is both bottom-up and top-down, closed and open system simultaneously. So I'm actually moving to the next research and the workshop we did actually in Strelka 3 summers ago. And this workshop is based on the other research I did, which was studying the phenomenon of the closed cities in Russia. Well, I'll explain a little bit later. Those closed cities constitute isolated, passive context, built and driven as a top-down project. Well, pretty much as this Arctic city I was showing in the beginning. It was very challenging to explore the question of how these cities might now be opened and actually kind of gaining their own forces, their own energy of existence, and how to introduce those bottom-up processes, forces which actually are missing there right now. So what are those closed cities? Built during the Cold War, a network of high security centers of research and production, Soviet closed cities, were typically enclosed by concrete walls and barbed wire and known only by the code number that followed their ZATO, closed territorial formation designation. That's probably quite important to know to guys who actually not from Russia, because the Russian students are obviously familiar with this zato thing. I don't know about it. It's very often when you tell about that, there's someone in audience actually from there. But it's quite specific phenomenon of Soviet heritage, let's say, we have. So from the beginning, closed cities embodied the idea of total isolation from the entire world for all the inhabitants, and could not be found on any maps or on any official records for 5 decades. For this reason, Zato had to represent the utopian ideal as a place to live and work. Zato were privileged places for the privileged few, especially when they compared to the other Soviet cities. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the closed cities were in a particularly difficult position. Many Zatos were left without sufficient central control and without funding. This resulted in a significant loss of population and a period of stagnation in the Zato that had flourished through the years of Cold War. Today, 40 of these cities still remain scattered over the territory of contemporary Russia, and with an overall population of more than 1 million. Zato, Sverdlovsk 44, is this one you can see here, now known as Novorossiysk, one of 10 atomic zone cities built for further Soviet nuclear program that brought elite scientists and technicians together in one place so as to work and live in total dedication for this singular case. Today, this city is 120 square kilometers territory, with a population about 100,000 civilians. The majority of them are involved in the civilian use nuclear research and production. Sverdlovsk 44 constitutes an overdetermined environment where not only urban system operates in a particular fixed and controlled way, but also individuals are active in acts in the restrained manner, controlled from the top down. All this makes the process of opening of the city very complex. To survive the process of slow liberation from total state control of city economy, the Zato needs to create a new environment, both social and physical, and an active environment where indeterminate processes happens, driven by the evolution of the system, or environment where actors absorb, participate, and adapt to change. The city has to understand that uncertainty, open-endedness, informality, intrinsic to the market economy, and excluded by the protocol of the secret city are the key elements of the physical and strategic environment for the potential commercial projects, the spin-offs of the existing main industry of the closed city, which actually only one force which can sustain this city is actually to define some spin-offs from this huge funded from the state industry. By understanding the specificity of the closed cities, it's important to introduce new open-ended social economic processes into the city and stimulate environment of the normal, let's say, open city. Addressing questions of the relations and tensions between closed and open system and the strategies and design decisions that may drive top-down and bottom-up operations, it is also concerned with the notion of how the public as ideal may be redefined and transformed in relations of the environment and design of urban landscape. Richard Sennett, I really often refer to his essay. He's actually kind of mentioned that he's writing a book which is called Open City for a couple of years already, and really hoping that it will actually be published soon. I'm very excited about it. But so far I have only this article to refer. So in this article, he blames the overdetermined urban environment of contemporary planned cities. He calls this closed system or the brittle city. He proposes the idea of an open city which is driven from open system in mathematics and computation. Sennett suggests to translate the concept of the open city into the visual and planning tool. The idea of the open and closed system are very abstract. Open system exists as the dynamics of constant exchange within environments, and it's very hard to predict the behavior of these systems, but they have capability to constantly self-adjust. The closed system is efficient. Opposite is efficient and stable, but not capable to finding internal forces to change, to respond to modified conditions. Both top-down driven strategies and potential emergence processes within a city have to form the equilibrium where local bottom-up initiatives will be able to support the processes of recapitalization of the closed city's economy. The main question we stated in our workshop at Strelka is how to achieve this equilibrium of closed and open in the passive environment of these closed cities, number 44. We were interested to discover what would be the agency capable of starting the local processes able to cooperate with existing closed context of the city, and at the same time gradually reduce the total dependence of Zato on external control. To do so, that is needed is a combination of social, economic, and spatial strategy for Zatos, thereby creating a Steve Johnson calls it controlled emergency on the new independent economy of the city, contributing potentials of the existing research industry and external interest. Also, we were very interested in what is this visual and planning tool for the open city may be. Anthony Picon, in his book on smart cities, is pointing out two types of political projects emerged today. The first focuses on controlling the urban organisms in an outlook not dissimilar to cybernetic research of the period of 50s and 70s into the running of complex systems. The one major project type which features a debate today, cities that call more upon initiatives or on cooperation between individuals than in collaboration driven from above. Let's say seek to prevent. So, and he believes that it is possible to envisage both of these orientations mutually supporting one another instead of being in conflict. So basically he's talking about that from one hand we can create this cybernetic control mechanism which is which has a lot of knowledge, a lot of data, and that's one idea of the smart city today. And another idea of a smart city is actually to create this interactive infrastructure and a platform for the bottom-up processes which is going on and happening in the city. And right now these are two, let's say, competing ideas about the city, but he says that actually maybe we can try to actually embrace both of them. And we were thinking maybe we could too. The synergy between both of these design orientations became an aspiration of our workshop. As the first one, the modeling and control mechanism, we proposed a computational simulation of the hypothetical behavior of the bottom-up processes within a closed cities. This mechanism of modeling of emergence became a multi-agent code which has been developed in collaboration with Rob Stewart Smith, one of directors of Design Research Lab and Architectural Association. We were really lucky to have him collaborating in our workshop. So the code simulates the behavior and patterns of the interrelations amongst different types of agents, and also lay out rules of evolution of types of agents within the next generation. So this basically very complex model explains the logic behind this processing script, and it's actually a different agents. So, well, it's an agent-based system which consists of agents. Different agents have some different algorithms of behavior. They have a different qualities, different speed, the different length of life. And also we were intending to actually create the second generation. So if you have two agents meeting each other, let's say two potentials of the territory meeting each other, maybe there is another potential for another level of the project can appear there. So we were looking into these, let's say, urban growth strategy behind this tool. So this code represents a prototypical model of urban development of the territory. Their agents may perform as social groups, potential initiatives, financial groups, and etc., which are responding to the local resources of the territory. In relation to Sverdlovsk 44, this modeling mechanism allowed us to test the dynamics of the complicated structure of interrelations within high numbers of factors of social economic strategy in the physical context of the spatial development of the territory. For instance, this is one really nice project from this workshop, and guys were testing their behavior of potential growth of the green infrastructure in the city and behavior of this project. So it was, let's say, certain qualities of a context which were attracting or detracting or killing or increasing the lifespan of the agents, which were represented different types of green infrastructure projects of the site. And then they were finding their, let's say, the most effective locations, and then collaborating, they were creating another generation of projects which could appear later on, which is quite interesting actually exercise. This is basically using not the agent-based motion, but it uses the Celerol-Thompson principle in looking for the most efficient combinations of projects. And it's basically the interesting thing about modeling and simulating these bottom-up processes, that is constant discovery while you're running it too fast or you're putting too much masses. And of course you have to be, let's say, you have to be realistic when you're doing that, but you also learn a lot while you're using it. And well, this is just let's say different using, let's say, Grasshopper. It's already visualization of some of results of these different scenarios. guys picked up using these simulation mechanism. The second design orientation Pickon defines as neo-cybernetic inspiration with technological overtones of a new perspective of democratization linked to the spread of information and communication technologies. To reflect upon that, we propose the material and informal infrastructure for the controlled emergence. This infrastructure is a form of intertwining media and urban landscape had to heat up an inactive environment of the closed city of Zato by initiating internal and external communications and maintaining bottom-up processes with social and production realm. As an example, one of the groups in our workshop was dealing with the specific social economic conditions of the closed city, such as deficit of local business projects caused by bureaucracy of the secret status of Zato and low self-motivation of the local community. Actually, bureaucracy is not creating that much problems as, let's say, the way local community behaves, because they are extremely inactive, and that's caused because they just been always protected and isolated and actually breed in this closed system. So it's very interesting social challenge, and guys were dealing with that because basically all economists who are trying to propose any strategy, and of course the bottom force of any sustainable city is a small business and a local economy which can appear. And the biggest problem was that people just don't wanna do that at all. And so guys were trying to deal with that, and the intention of the project was to support local bottom-up business initiatives by means of constructing the virtual and physical infrastructure of local business incubators. This infrastructure meant to become an informational, education, and networking space. Students analyzed data of the online offers in the city related to the local business initiatives. Then they composed a list of vital combinations of the existing offers and added missing initiatives with which would be able to receive private, federal, and government funds. So basically here you could see this one is a different, these agents represent different offers which guys picked up online. And they appears in the, let's say, in this area of the city, and this is a real city which is has a different potentials of attracting different projects in different parts of it, and also these projects themselves, because people just offering their small ideas and small projects, but the bigger strategy actually combining them in the bigger clusters, which can become a base of the bigger business incubator and actually get some funds for these groups of projects. So that's what basically they were doing, and they oops. So as an infrastructure of emergence, students developed the prototype of the web page, which was visualizing the promising project within a suitable context of the city using some sort of Google Street View interface. This web page would guide an educate local business community where they can see the most prospective business initiatives and also can see the visualization of the potential future projects, which is continuously updating according to the new upcoming local business or online offers. In this case, web page will embedded strategy for the local business with embedded strategy for the local business became a powerful feedback instrument capable to collect the data, visualize the potentials, influence the local entrepreneurs, and at the same time guide the city authorities. So here the combination of the behavioral modeling and communication technology shaped a tool for a speculative development of the territory. It's impossible to predict and control the development of an open system and thereby find the most effective solution for it. The one system requires a different approach, an experimental. This is why we were focused a lot on using a digital simulation in motion, dealing with open system. We have to understand its behavior and the complexity of its interrelations within a context. In this case, we would be able to influence it by introducing new components of modifying its conditions. One of the main challenges in work with phenomenon of these closed cities is whether we can construct an emergence in an active context and how to design contexts that could not only implement but also launch a hidden resources of the bottom-up processes. Well, this question we were asking many times during this workshop, and we probably still could not really answer it, but we developed our, let's say, different approach. It's let's say the hypothetical modeling in this closed system, what could happen, and maybe find some, I don't know, some connections with the real context. And in this way, I really like this quote, which actually you can find in Stephen Johnson's book, and book Emergence. So this is the quote from the Nobel Prize nominee in biology, Gerald Edelman, when he's been asked about how when do we simulate events, so how we can actually simulate the evolution of the natural system. And he actually gives certain list. You have to simulate the organ as making, you have to think about mutations, interdependency, simulate the world and environment around. But I really like the key last suggestion he says, and then see what happens. So that's basically how you work with the city as an ecological and natural system. You basically see what happens, and it's a slightly different approach as we architects and urban planners and designers used to, when you have to have a plan, and of course you have a certain plan, but even that's the way how it's an interesting example of the shift in how you predict weather these days. Before, it was these calculations and you had this percentage and etc. It was a certain, like, very mathematical and very, let's say, kind of hierarchical process of coming to the conclusion what will be the weather tomorrow. But today it's slightly different. It's monitoring. So it's this huge amount of data we always kind of get, and we see what happens when we monitor. And then we use these patterns we learn from the previous time, and then we kind of project them to the patterns we have now, and then we make our prediction. So it's slightly different way, let's say looser way working with the natural ecology. And so that's what also we kind of suggest to the way we suggest to deal with cities too. Well, as a, let's say, as a critique to this workshop I just showed about the closed cities, one can say that we still stayed really much on this immaterial level, focused mostly on modeling of urban strategy, but not thinking about the material agency of the implementation of this strategy. Even an example which I showed you about certain infrastructure which unify people and allows them to realize their bottom-up activity is actually also virtual. It's kind of, again, the virtual simulation of a strategy and web page internet infrastructure. So, and this is, let's say, to try to, this is the next workshop. We were, I was actually really happy to collaborate with Masha Kuptsova and Vadim Smakhtin on this workshop. It was a fantastic group of people, and here the intention was actually to go one step further and actually think what will be this material system which could be a driver of these kind of bottom-up processes in the city. Actually, let's say the aim of this workshop was to build a global urban project out of this serious local initiative, physical initiatives, and big analytical model of the environmental behavior. Our context was the waterfront in Yalta in Crimea, and in order to design this time both material and immaterial landscape, we divided projects in two parts, hardware and software parts. Software was our virtual strategy, which were connecting data, collecting data about the dynamic environment and self-adjusting. Hardware was, as I said, these few small-scale projects which were meant to be both an intervention, changing the environment, and interacting with the user, and data collection points, and like our little monitors in the space, which were actually recording the changes of the territory around them. So in the end, we had three types of data describing the complex behavior of our waterfront context. One was the objective data, well, relatively objective data from the smart citizen sensors. Well, I'm not going to explain to you guys what it is. So. Yeah, you just use it. We're just going to just, yeah. And another type of data we used was, again, relatively subjective data, the data which we collected from the social networks. And under the guidance of Vadim Smakhtin, he's a founder of Matryoshka project and one of co-directors of Habitatum, if I'm right. So under his guidance, students were dealing with Twitter, Instagram, and Foursquare data. So, and this third type of data was the input of our local small-scale interactive projects. And so all these projects, they were actually, all these data, all these three types of data was an input into the global strategy. And this is one of the projects of students, and it's called Project Cooling Spot. And intervention, so this small, let's say, element which were actually creating a change of the territory and at the same time recording the processes which were going on around it. It was this natural cooling system, like a little infrastructure to make environment more comfortable. And analysis. Actually, it's quite interesting. Here, guys use the social networks analysis and overlaid it in a very fun way with information from sensors. They were dealing with heat, so they took a smart citizen and they went along their waterfront, and they recorded whole cold and hot, let's say, temperatures of the territory. But at the same time, they looked into the social networks, and they were looking for the key words hot and heat and shadow. And in the same time, they created let's say, this map of notions around the waterfront, and then they overlap this very subjective data about where is cold and where is hot with objective data from a smart citizen. Another interesting thing which guys did was that they used Twitter data, and they were looking into it was just a very interesting idea from Vadim about that you can actually record the tweets where it happened, and also record the place about which this tweet was actually the place this tweet was mentioning. So you're basically recording two places. One is a desirable place, and the one is a place where actually this place was mentioned. So in this way, guys managed to actually draw these desirable attraction points and the points which actually send the user towards this direction. And then with the help of one of our tutors, Ruslan Timashov, they created a very nice simulation where using agent-based, actually founding these overcrowded and overheated spots of human motions.
Hello, Maria. Kadia, thank you for the lecture, but we are now in 1 hour slot. I just need if you can wrap up the presentation, just to keep the agenda. I don't want to cut it, but we also have to.
No, I think we're almost done. And let me just quickly show the other project, and that's it. So this is the one where guys were dealing with algae and using motion, using the velocity of the different types of water, dirty water and clean water in the bay, and also working with algae infrastructure which were finding its way in location in the bay. And another one is a really nice project where guys were using the real attraction points, these like pontoon elements, which you're moving depending on how busy area is. And guys went and used these sound you smart citizen, and they were recording the loudest corners of the waterfront, and actually from that they were defining the comfortable zone or not very comfortable zones, and they were managing redistributing using these attraction points and light strategy along the waterfront. So basically, probably the last thing I wanted to say is that it is important to understand that complex and interconnected system we propose. Still, well, there is some danger that talking about ecology and cities ecology still can be very metaphoric. And if you think that you created some very complex system which you run in motion, and it's kind of something emerged, something appeared there, so you can draw the parallel that is a natural system. This is absolutely not enough. It will be still, let's say, metaphoric approach. And that's why I showed this last workshop, because I think it's quite important to be so connected to the natural processes and monitor it as much as possible and use as many data input points. And your project actually has to be, it's very important that your project would be this data collection point and your kind of medium between the bigger strategy and the natural processes which are going in within a city. And then probably you can talk about these both material and immaterial landscapes and the city as a landscape. So, well, this is pretty much I wanted to say. Thank you very much. Sorry that it was quite long. Didn't expect that.
No, it was perfect. It was perfect. We just started a little bit late, but we have other appointments for the next hours, so I couldn't keep the lecture going. Sorry for interrupting, actually.
Okay.
So, going back, I think you touched a lot of the topics that we are also trying to implement here in Barcelona. And I'm really glad, actually, that Maria gave us the opportunity to meet you and to see your presentation. You talk about materiality, and now we can shape the environment through materiality, simulating the behavior of agents and using those agents as a tool to design the urban space. You also talk about the system of emergent techniques of design, no? They are through the definition of the behaviors of those agents, and many other things that from the smart citizen to your data collection strategies. I think it was absolutely in line with what we want to implement here as well. So thank you.
Especially enjoyed all the projects with the pressure. It's very specific. I think you can hear me, because it's very kind of common to see these dynamic processes here in this like rigid background of Russian cities. So I especially enjoy the projects which are located from the slow cities of Russia, which is very specific. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So I'm gonna thank Maria and Katia for this lecture, and I'm gonna close it now, and I will meet you all on Wednesday with a lecture from Beirut, if I'm not wrong. So thank you again, and good continuation of the Global Summer School.
Thank you, Aldo. Ciao.
Bye. Bye.